In this episode of the Linux course, we're going to talk about the shell. What is the shell? What are the functions? What is it meant for? Do we understand it without knowing the actual definition already? Have we interacted with shells before? And how it works? What are some common examples? So let's begin. The shell is an interface between the user and the kernel. The kernel can be thought of as an interpreter for computers. When we type an instruction into a computer, the shell's job is to convey that instruction in machine language to the kernel, which can then operate on the hardware. So the shell is our interface between us and the computer. The functions of the shell are doing everything the computer does, right? If we want to run a program, we can give a certain command or click on some specific icon. We want to manage files, manipulate text files, create users, everything that you can do on a computer, that's the job for the shell to accomplish. There are command line shells and there's also graphical shells. The graphical shell might be something that you might be familiar with if you've ever used a Windows or even a macOS operating system that even on Linux distributions you will find. However, the command line shell can sometimes offer a deeper level of control to your system itself. The shell is also seen as a command interpreter as it accepts your commands, interprets them for the kernel, and then executes using the hardware. Some common shells include the bash shell, which stands for born again shell. This is the most common default shell in many and most Linux distributions. There's also the C shell, which is an interface very similar to C programming. And then there's the Korn shell, which is often popular in Unix programs. What you need to understand is, of course, the job of the shell is to allow you to execute the programs to complete system-level tasks, and you don't have to speak a very complex language. The job of the shell is to interpret your commands as the machine language and execute them. So this is a little bit more about the shell. Coming up in the lab, you're going to see how to identify what shell you're using and know more about the shell in Linux environments. So this episode is all about the shell, the Linux shell. All operating systems have a shell, and what it really is, it's an interface, almost like a control panel that will take your instructions as the user and interpret them and execute them against the actual hardware. It's the interface between the user and the operating system kernel. We talked about how it works, some popular examples of shell, and what the most common default shell is in Linux. Thank you for joining me in this episode. I'll see you in the next one. Hi, in this episode, we're going to explore about the different shells that are available to us here in CentOS. So a shell really is it can be command line or it can even be graphical. It's really the interface between you and the operating system or the kernel. So here we can see the graphical shell is available to us. We have our power options available to us, our networking options. All right, and along the bottom we have our, a tile. We can switch different desktops. So if we want a second desktop with certain items and a first desktop with certain items, we can do that. And here we have access to our different applications. Now, shells come in all types of, shapes and sizes. So let's take a look in the File Explorer. I'm going to go and show you where we can find what type of shells are available to us inside here in CentOS. So I'm going to click on Other Locations and go ahead and click on Computer. And inside this folder labeled ETC, this is a configurations folder. I'm going to go in here and look for a file called shells. So this file will show me all the shells that are configured to be used by my CentOS operating system. And here is that file called shells. We can open it and we can see that the basic shell sh is available to us. The same thing with bash, which is born again shell, along with, so these are the two shells available to us currently in CentOS. That's sh, which is just the regular shell, and bash, which is the born again shell. But it doesn't stop here. If you were so inclined to, you can download other shells so that you can create scripts and work inside other shells as well inside Linux. But for now, the default shell that we are using, it is bin bash. Another way to find out your default shell is if you click on activities and go into the command line here through the terminal, there is a variable called shell. So we're going to type the command echo, which is just asking to repeat something. And I'm going to type in shell, and we can see that the shell that I am using is bin bash. We'll explore more about the echo command and variables further in the course, but to really identify the shell that we're using, we're just echoing, meaning spelling out or saying out this variable, which is whatever shell that is assigned to my user, the user being administrator. So you can see the administrator is using bin bash. So hopefully you have an idea of really what shells are and how to find what shells are available in your Linux distribution and which shell you are using in your Linux distribution. With that being said, I'll close my lab here. I want to thank you for joining me, and I'll see you in the next one.